Okay, we will now read from Mark 1:14 through 20, on back of the template. Now after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God, and saying, "The time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news." As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. This is God's good news for all of God's people. Thanks be to God.
Let's bow our heads in prayer. Loving God, once again we ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our Redeemer. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Occasionally as I'm driving over to the other church in the morning, I'll have the radio on the car and just I'll listen to NPR or something else. Usually it's a classic rock station, something. This morning I hopped in the car and I'd left a CD in the player, and it's this live recording Doobie Brothers CD. But anybody remember the Doobie Brothers? Thank you. All you aging baby boomers with me, thank you. But it turned out that you ever have one of those moments when the theme song actually comes on for the day? You know, the soundtrack for the day came on, and it was Long Train Running by the Doobie Brothers. And if you're familiar with that song, you know what the hook is. Without love, where would you be now? That's kind of what I want to talk about this morning, this message today, that idea that, because quite frankly, without love, I wouldn't be here. And maybe some of you are feeling the same way. Had not love rescued me, rescued us as a family, I wouldn't be here. Lord knows where I'd be. When we talk about this moment when love reaches into our hearts and calls to us and beckons to us and asks us to come closer. This is one of those moments, we're looking at the story of Jesus calling the first four disciples. We had a moment last Sunday out of the Gospel of John, Jesus calling two of his disciples sort of further into his ministry. But this is in Mark's Gospel, this is the first four that Jesus calls. And at first glance, and Mark does this. The Gospel of Mark is a pretty spare, sort of bare bones approach to Jesus' ministry. And Mark doesn't waste many words on this, especially here. The introduction that Jesus has to these four guys is really pretty brief. If they knew him at all, it's just a few words. What did Jesus have to show or present or give to these four guys to encourage them that the future that he offered was so compelling, so wonderful, so amazing that they would drop absolutely everything that they had and follow him, turning their back on family and friends and everything they'd worked for, turning their back on their livelihood, all on the sort of thin idea of being fishers of people. Now, what in the world does that mean? I don't know if you've ever done one of those leaps of faith moments and had that time, but quite frankly, in those moments when I've had to do that, that big change moment, it scares me to death. I wonder if that might have, any fear at all, anything at all, might have been in these guys' hearts. If we're not scared, if we're not a little bit frightened, if we're not somehow a little apprehensive about this, maybe we're not paying attention well enough. This is a big change. This is a big deal. I don't know if you're familiar with the C.S. Lewis books and movie, the Narnia series, and the movie that came out a long time ago, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's great stuff. But there's one moment where it's early in the movie and the kids are just getting their first sort of introduction to what this new territory and new land is like, and they're having a conversation with, of all people, a beaver. Okay? And the older sister, Susan, after hearing first about this lion who was the leader of this country, this lion, Aslan. And I won't spoil too much of it to say that Aslan is the hero figure, and in fact, he's sort of, in Lewis's universe, the Christ figure in this story. And Susan, just hearing that the leader of this thing is a huge lion, says to the beaver, is he quite safe? Mr. Beaver replies, safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. The truth is that sometimes Christ asks us to take that leap of faith, to leave what's safe and familiar for a preferred future, for something that, if we're paying attention, not only scares us, but enchants us and delights us. It calls us to have the courage to step out in faith. Ralph Waldo Emerson writes, the purpose in life is not to be happy, it's to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference, that you have lived and lived well. We're called to that future, and quite frankly, the good news is that your future is not going to be the same as mine or the person sitting next to you. Our futures, our preferred future, that thing that we're being called to, is going to be as unique as you and I are. That's the good news. The ways that you can be useful to the world and find a purpose in your life and make a difference in the world are as many and as varied as you are and the needs that you will confront. An old friend once told me that where we can be of greatest service is where our abilities intersect with the world's need. Let me say that again, because that's kind of important. It's sort of a big deal. Our abilities, the stuff that we bring, the freight that we have, the lessons that we've learned, all of the stuff that we bring to this life, our moment of connection, our moment of service, our point of contact, is where all that we have intersects with the need that someone brings to us. It is so much a part of who we are that point of service, that moment of usefulness, resonates with the image of God that is planted deep within inside of us. That image that seeks to nurture and care for and love with that creative image that is that presence of God. When we find that moment, when we have that time, when we can use who we are to help someone else, that's a blessing. Jesus adds one other element to this process, this call. In the 15th verse, Bo just read, the word that Jesus uses to express that is that the time has been fulfilled. That word in Greek carries a little more than just, well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's time for me to meet some guys. It is that the time is full. It is that fullness of time. It is that this is the right time to do this. Not only in the lives of these four men, but in the lives of the course of history as well. Jesus is meeting the first four members of the disciples who will walk with him for the next 3 years. It was good and a right time for these four men because the Hebrew people had all anxiously awaited that Messiah, that person that was going to free them from the yoke of bondage that would bring back the golden age of Israel. They were anxiously looking for that, and so they were, in that sense, primed for this moment. I wonder if they knew who they were talking to at that time, that he was that man. Maybe, just maybe, they saw in Jesus' eyes that day the offer of a future that was so much more than the life of a simple fisherman, but a life that would be in some way bring peace to the people of Israel. But this is what a call story is. It is that leap of faith that is frightening and trusting at the same time. It is that moment when we watch our ability to serve find an intersection with the world's need to receive. It is that vision forward that is so compelling that we can't imagine doing anything other than answering yes. And quite frankly, if you can imagine answering anything other than yes, go back to fishing. You're not ready yet. Last but not least, it's God's timing. And it seems to work out. Certainly it's not the timing that is at our convenience, but it is that thing that prepares our hearts in question to answer. See, there's the call. You guys didn't think I could work that out, did you? For anybody watching on YouTube, the phone is ringing in the background, so that's that. This process, this walk, this journey is my call story. I'm not going to dwell too much on it because most of you already know the journey that Kim and I have gone through over the last number of years. There are a few of you that don't, so I'll share just the briefest parts of it and the parts that I quite frankly think witness to what it means to answer God's call for whatever it's worth. Following the death of our daughter, Katie, who lost her 5.5-year battle to cancer, we found a church. Kim and I we hadn't knocked on the door of a church in years at that point. And quite frankly, I was angry enough at God that the only reason I wanted to have an afterlife was so that I could spit in his eye. But we came back to church because I thought somehow or another that was the only way I'd ever be able to see my daughter again, and that's what brought us back to church. We found a little church about this size out in Southern California that picked up our broken pieces and showed us what grace looked like and gave us a much bigger image of why we were there. They healed us and cried with us and walked with us. And God knows they were patient with us. Over time, that gift of healing that we had received and experienced evolved into a call to share just exactly that gift with other people that were struggling and broken and mourning and in need. And I found my point of intersection. What I brought to the moment and the need that the world offered was there. In my story, in my moment, I found it in parish ministry. I found it here with you, doing this. And I left what I had been doing for 17 years, and that was our leap of faith. Kim's leap was that she hung along with me. Bless her heart, she showed more patience and forbearance than anybody ever deserved. My bosses, on the other hand, were not quite as understanding. They thought I had lost my mind. But 3 years and a lot of student loans later, classes were over. And Kim and I moved back to Missouri to find our first appointment down in Sykeston. And that's the short version. The takeaway is this. God walked with us every step of the way. And God redeemed the pain that I had and bore the brunt of my anger and showed me that he could walk alongside me. If he could do that for me, he could do that for others. I share this story for one reason and one reason only. How is God calling you? It is as unique as the experiences that have equipped you to serve. It is as unique as all of the bumps and bruises and the twists in the road and all of that stuff. It is the good days and the bad days that you carry at this moment. And it is as distinctive as the people that God puts in your path to help. Your intersection. Your spot. Are you ready to find your place? Your point of service? Are you ready to hear your call? One of my absolute favorite Christmas gifts that we got over this last season was just this. It's a very simple black canvas thing, and it hangs on the wall right above my sermon writing spot. And yeah, I've got a little nest that I write in. And it says this: you have changed the world because you have touched our lives. And those words are the most humbling thing. To imagine making a difference in somebody else's life. Make no mistake, in what you do now or the future, God is calling you to use the gifts and the graces and the experience and the time and the road that you have and the scars that you wear. God is calling you to use every bit of that to find someone to help, to fish for people. The Methodist Church, in Methodist speak, it is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. The tagline that I like to put on the end of that is one broken heart at a time. You do that by showing them Christ, not you. You do that by showing how you've been helped and healed and held along the way. You do that by showing them Christ, by being the Bible that may be the only Bible that some person will ever experience. By showing grace. Are you ready? Here's your call. Let's bow our heads. Gracious and loving God, show me where my point is, my intersection. With all that you have taught me all these years, reveal where I might serve, where we might serve. As a church as a whole and as your followers, as individuals, Lord, open our eyes that we might serve you. And we ask this in your Son's name.